my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm. What's the procedure, everyone?
So once again, the Bluey fandom has completely erupted, but thankfully this time it's for a good reason. And it's because we just got news that Bluey is getting a full-on movie. And not only is it a movie, but one that's set to release in cinemas worldwide in 2027, with Ludo and the show's creators working with the BBC and Disney to make and distribute the film, which really shows that this isn't just some sort of made-for-TV or streaming special, but a complete theatrical movie. And today, we'll be discussing everything you need to know about this upcoming project, with some amazing and perhaps even potentially concerning news about the show's future. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, despite being a theatrical movie, it should be noted that the film is being closely worked on by those who have been on the original show, including the show's composer and busker VA, Geoff Bush, Melanie Zanetti and Dave McCormack, the voices of the parents Bandit and Chili in the show, Charlie Aspinwall and Daley Pearson, the co-founders of Ludo Studio, the animation studio that created Bluey, Richard Jeffrey, who served as a co-director for the show, as well as, fun fact, the VA for Mackenzie's dad, and of course, Bluey's creator himself, Joe Brumm, who will be serving as appropriately the film's writer and director, with Brumm himself even saying that he already had a script planned and that the movie will serve as a natural extension for the show, with him going even as far as to say that, quote, "I've always thought Bluey deserved a theatrical movie. I want this to be an experimental event for the whole family to enjoy together." However, even with that, we also have some new talent being introduced for this big project, such as, for example, producer Amber Naismith, who's worked on other animated films such as Happy Feet, the Lego Movie, and its first spin-off, the Lego Batman Movie. And with this, I'm sure there will also be many more roles announced, and likely a few celebrity actors, considering the scope of the film, but any exact info on this is yet to be announced. Also, as we mentioned earlier, the Bluey movie, just like the show itself, will be produced with support from the Australian government and in collaboration with Disney and the BBC, who are basically the show's two main distributors and have had a relationship with the franchise for a while at this point, which to me shows that the film will likely be in good hands, as not only does the film have a ton of resources and great support, but still has the original creators and people in charge, with Brumm seemingly having most of the creative ideas for what the film will be already, and control over how it'll actually be executed, which is very promising. And the fact that he specifically mentioned wanting to do this for a while, and felt that it was natural, also shows that this likely isn't just a quick decision or cash grab pushed by one of the bigger companies, and is an actual, genuine, passionate effort to expand the franchise in a way that feels right, which is also another brilliant sign. So regarding further details about the movie, there hasn't been too much said yet, but from the few details we have, there's a couple things we can speculate on. Right off the bat though, one thing that really stood out to me was the mention of the movie being animated with CG, or computer graphics, which depending on how it's executed, could be a really interesting departure from the show's current style. Although with that said, it should be noted that 2D CG is a thing, and even then, 3D CG has been used before to resemble 2D cartoons with notably great success. And with the term CG being really broad honestly, it's difficult to say what the film will actually look like, but I wouldn't be surprised if the movie had a much more expensive and cinematic look, but still kept the charm and details that makes the show and its characters so iconic, which could result in a film that's very visually stunning, especially when considering the show's already beautiful art on a much lower budget. So if I had to guess, it will probably be kinda similar to the show, and not too drastic of a change, but just an overall significant upgrade. And regarding the story itself, we pretty much have zero details on this right now, but we can assume that it'll definitely take the show's premise on a level not seen before, with likely a more in-depth story or event that'll of course justify the longer runtime in perhaps a similar fashion to The Sign, except on a way larger scale, with maybe even more action, more stakes, and many, many more emotional moments that'll probably make all of us cry. And yeah, you could argue that it could just be something like a compilation of shorter stories, or a much more casual story that just kinda acts as an extended episode, but thinking about it, with how dedicated people like Joe Brumm are to Bluey, and are to maintaining its high qualities, I feel like they would be against doing something like this, because Bluey isn't just a standard or cheap kids show. That's really not the reason why it's so popular, but rather one that was meant to go above and beyond and do things right no matter what. And personally, I am very curious on how they're gonna be able to pull this off, considering that, going back to the show, Season 3 and The Sign just set the bar to an incredible height, and it's hard for me to imagine them going way further than that in the current context. But with that, I'm still confident that the creators will still deliver something special. And who knows, maybe they could change things up in a way that feels natural, such as introducing the show's first true villain or antagonist of sorts that maybe puts the family in a difficult situation they all must overcome, or even something like aging the characters up even more, which could present a whole new array of conflicts and situations, such as maybe the kids going to a new school, or learning more about the world and life itself from a big event that affects their family. After all, the original voice actors for the kids are kinda getting old, and they are only going to age up even more as time goes on. And it's not even confirmed if they'll reprise their roles in the film, but we'll just have to wait and see. After all, this is just pure speculation on my end, and not in any way confirmed or even hinted at all yet, but it is interesting to imagine, especially under the assumption that this could be a finale of sorts for everything we've seen so far, even beyond The Sign, and truly give the characters some kind of great test or challenge that really wraps up everything the show is about and what these characters stand for. So with all of the excitement of the movie announcement being pretty high, and for good reason, I want to actually put that aside for a minute and discuss something that might be a little bit worrying, which is the future of the Bluey franchise and the show itself. Because with the film's announcement, Joe Brumm not only revealed his role on the upcoming project, but also broke some news on his role for the original show, which is that as of now, he will likely no longer be working on the actual show. There's a lot to unpack here, but in summary, while this didn't mean the actual end of the show, he would at least be taking a break from it, mainly to focus on the movie, and because he felt that a potential season 4, at least from his current position or ideas, would not be as good as the previous season, which admittedly is a pretty high standard to overcome. And to reference the man himself, he actually said, quote, "I always said I wouldn't keep making the show if I thought I couldn't make any new season as good as the last. In the event I can't wrap my head around doing more seasons myself, The Sign will mark my TV finale for Bluey, and I wrote it as such. To walk away from it while it's at such a height will seem crazy to some, but for now, I am finding it difficult to reach back genuinely into that 4 to 6 year old world and write authentically." And honestly, while it is concerning that the main guy in charge of this whole thing is possibly done with it, I do still really respect his decision if this is all, for at least his take on Bluey, as it shows that he really does care about creating a quality product and isn't just going to go ahead and milk the show to death, even with a lack of ideas. Although with that said, just because Joe Brumm may not be involved with it in the future, this doesn't mean that the show itself is done, because despite the show being on somewhat of a hiatus already, and Ludo mainly focusing on other projects, I'm sure there's more than enough people and support that will eventually get new seasons in store. But unlike the last ones, it's likely that we could see Bluey be spearheaded by a new figure, with other writers or Ludo directors like Daley Pearson perhaps being put in charge. And in fact, it seems like the situation with Bluey could be very similar to another show like SpongeBob, who, for example, also had a show run by its original creator, the late Stephen Hillenburg, for its first 3 seasons, but was eventually left to other people after its first movie. And knowing what happened to shows like SpongeBob, the idea of Bluey being run by others outside the original creator can be a very slippery slope, and one that could very easily cause the show to lose its charm or be milked to oblivion by people who don't really care as much. But hopefully, with Ludo being a smaller, independent studio and not bought out by Disney or someone else in the future, I personally think that the show, regardless of who's exactly in charge, will still be in overall good hands, at least for the next couple years. Assuming that Ludo stays independent, I can imagine the show running for at least a season 4 and maybe a 5, or if the studio and franchise is bought out, probably closer to something like an 8 or 10, which is both interesting and moderately terrifying to think about. And not to mention the fact that the show already has, and will probably continue to expand in many other ways, with potential spin-offs always being a possibility, although not yet confirmed. And also not to mention further developments on things such as the existing minisodes, or even other real-life attractions, similar to experiences such as Bluey's World in Australia, or even something like the touring Bluey's Big Play live show. But in summary, while I am a bit concerned about the show's quality without Joe Brumm possibly being in the mix, and worried that this new era may begin to mark the downfall of the franchise, it's also fair to assume that this can be a brand new beginning too, with the franchise going to even bigger lengths and setting the bar as a truly spectacular cornerstone for storytelling in all age groups, joining the ranks as one of the most iconic cartoons or even shows of the 21st century. But with all that said, that is currently everything we know about the upcoming Bluey movie, and while I'm a bit cautious, I am also honestly super excited to see how this turns out, and hope that the Bluey franchise, despite some potential changes in the future, still has many years left for quality storytelling. But now, I want to hear what you think. Are you hyped for the Bluey movie? And what do you think will happen to the franchise? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, my name's Hideaki, and I'll be signing out. Goodbye everyone.